I came home from work to see my husband dangling our baby over the balcony, screaming, "Do as I say or I'm dropping him." I stared at our 8-month-old Rowan being held over the railing by his ankle. He was screaming and crying, turning blue as the blood was rushing to his brain. I dropped my purse and screamed, "Silas, what are you doing?" I ran toward the balcony, but Silas jerked back. He held Rowan further over the edge. "Don't come any closer or I drop him right now," Silas yelled. I stopped and put my hands up. "Please, whatever you want, just bring him inside." Silas's face was cold. His eyes looked empty, like he wasn't even the same person anymore. "Call my brother right now." "What? Why?" "Call him." Silas shook Rowan slightly. Okay. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. "Why do you want me to call Knox?" Silas stared at me. "I know you've been sleeping with him. Call him. Tell him to come here. Right now." My stomach dropped. "I'm not." "Silas, that's your brother. I would never do that." "Call him now or I drop Rowan." I called Knox. "Hey, what's up? You need to come to our apartment right now." My voice was shaking. "It's an emergency. Please hurry." 15 minutes felt like 15 hours. Silas stood on the balcony holding Rowan over the edge the entire time. Rowan was screaming so hard he could barely breathe. Knox burst through the door. "What's happening?" He saw Silas on the balcony with Rowan. His face went white. "Silas, what are you doing?" "That's your son. You two have been sleeping together. Admit it." Knox's mouth dropped open. "What? No, that's insane." "Don't lie to me," Silas screamed. "We're not lying." I was sobbing. "Prove it. Show me your text messages. Both of you." We both pulled out our phones, showed him everything. Our texts were just normal stuff. Silas looked at the messages. Then he looked back at us. "You deleted them. Show me your bank statements." Knox pulled up his banking app. "Look, no hotel charges, nothing suspicious." Silas kept shaking his head. "You're lying." "I know you are. You hugged her too long at Christmas. You smiled at her at my birthday party. You drove her home from work." Knox looked desperate. "That's because I'm your brother." But Silas wouldn't listen. No matter what we said, he just kept saying we were lying. Then his voice got quiet. Calm. "Fine. Since you're both lying to my face, you're going to pay me." "What?" I couldn't breathe. "Transfer me all your money. Both of you. Every single account. Right now. Or I drop him." "Silas, please. Now!" Knox and I both grabbed our phones. We were crying and shaking, but we did it. I emptied everything. $53,000 gone. Knox transferred everything he had too. Ceylon, then he looked up at us. "Thank you." And then he let go of Rowan. Just opened his hand and dropped my baby off the 3rd floor balcony. My scream didn't even sound human. It was like something ripped out of my chest. Silas ran inside. He shoved Knox hard into the wall. He shoved me to the floor. Then he ran out the front door. I scrambled to my feet. I ran for the stairs. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. I just ran. Down the stairs. 3 flights. As fast as I could go. I burst outside into the parking lot. I expected to see my baby's body on the pavement. I expected to see blood. But when I got there was nothing. No baby. No body. Just empty pavement. "Rowan!" I screamed. I ran around looking everywhere. Under cars. In the bushes. "Rowan! Where are you?" My baby was gone. Just gone. And Knox was gone too. I looked around. His car wasn't in the parking lot anymore. He'd disappeared. A neighbor heard me screaming. She came outside. "Are you okay?" "What's wrong?" "My phone. I need a phone." I grabbed hers with shaking hands. I called 911. "My boyfriend dropped my baby from the balcony. I can't find him. Please help me." The police came in 6 minutes. "Ma'am, we need you to explain what happened." I told them everything through sobs. The accusation. The money. The officer looked confused. "Ma'am, there's no body here." "I know. Where's my baby?" They pulled up the building's security footage right there on a laptop in the parking lot. The footage showed our 3rd floor balcony. It showed Silas holding Rowan over the edge. Him letting go. Then the camera angle switched to the ground. An older woman was standing directly below. Right where Rowan would fall. She caught Rowan in her arms. I recognized her immediately. That's Vivian. That's his mother. The footage showed Vivian running to a van with Rowan in her arms. Silas ran out of the building and jumped in. The van sped away. More footage showed Knox leaving through the back exit during all the chaos. His car was gone. They planned this, I whispered. All 3 of them. Everything hit me at once. Vivian always hated me. She always said I was too young to be a mother. She told Silas she'd raise Rowan better. Silas had been asking about my savings for weeks. They created the fake affair story. They robbed me and took my baby anyway. I collapsed right there in the parking lot. The officer handed me his phone. "Is there someone we can call?" I thought of Marlo, my best friend. I dialed her number. They took Rowan. Silas and Vivian took him. "I'm coming right now. Cade will help." Cade, her husband. High-ranking military intelligence. I sat on the curb outside my building, trying to hold the phone steady enough to dial Marlo's number. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The officer stood a few feet away, talking into his radio. Other neighbors were coming outside now, watching everything happen. I kept staring at the empty parking lot where Rowan should have been, where his body should have been, but there was nothing. Just pavement and a few scattered leaves. Marlo's car pulled up 28 minutes later. She jumped out before it fully stopped. Cade was right behind her in his truck, carrying a laptop bag. He walked straight to the officers with his military posture, all business and focus. Marlo dropped down next to me on the curb and wrapped her arms around me. I started sobbing again, the kind that made my whole body shake. She didn't say anything, just held me. Cade was already asking the officers questions in that calm, controlled voice he used for serious situations. I heard him asking about the security footage, what agencies had been contacted, whether they'd issued an Amber Alert yet. The officers seemed surprised by how much he knew to ask about. One of them pulled up the laptop with the footage again. Cade leaned in close, watching it multiple times. He pointed at the screen. His voice got harder. He was showing them something about Vivian's position. How perfect it was. How she was standing in exactly the right spot. The officers looked at the footage again, leaning closer. Cade pointed out that Vivian was wearing gloves even though it was August. She had a bag already prepared and ready. This wasn't panic or impulse. This was completely planned. One officer pulled out his phone and started making calls. I heard him say something about FBI involvement, about organized kidnapping, about possible interstate flight. Cade came over and crouched down in front of me. His face was serious but kind. He told me they were going to find Rowan. He promised they had resources and contacts that would help. Marlo helped me stand up. My legs felt weak. She kept her arm around my waist, holding me steady. She told me I was coming to their house, that I couldn't go back to my apartment right now. I didn't argue. I couldn't go back there. Couldn't walk past that balcony. Couldn't see the spot where Silas had held my baby over the edge. Marlo drove while I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window but not really seeing anything. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rowan falling, saw Silas's hand opening, saw my baby dropping through the air. At their house, Marlo took me straight to the couch. She sat next to me and just let me cry. She didn't try to tell me it would be okay. Didn't try to make me feel better. Just sat there with me while I fell apart. Cade was in the other room making phone calls. I could hear his voice low and intense. He was calling people. Military contacts, he'd said. People who knew how to find missing persons. People who had access to systems and databases the regular police didn't use. About 2 hours later, there was a knock on the door. A woman walked in wearing a dark suit and carrying a leather folder. She had short hair and sharp eyes that took in everything immediately. She introduced herself as Agent Nova Bishop from the FBI. She specialized in parental kidnapping cases. She sat down across from me and explained that the first 48 hours were the most important. They were already tracking Silas's phone. They had the van's license plate and were checking traffic cameras. She asked me questions about Vivian, about their relationship, about anything Vivian had said about Rowan or about me. I told her everything. How Vivian always said I was too young to be a mother. How she told Silas she could raise Rowan better. How she made comments about taking him herself. How Silas had been asking about my savings for weeks. Nova wrote everything down in her notebook. Her face stayed calm and professional, but I saw her jaw tighten when I described how Silas had held Rowan over the balcony. How he'd extorted the money from both me and Knox before dropping him anyway. She asked about Knox, whether he had any reason to help Silas. I opened my mouth to say no, but then I stopped. I realized I didn't actually know. I'd always assumed Knox was on my side. He seemed horrified by what was happening, but his car was gone. He'd disappeared right after. What if I was wrong about everything? What if he'd been part of it from the start? Nova pulled out her tablet and showed me traffic camera footage. Knox's car had been caught leaving the area right after Silas ran. The footage showed him heading toward the highway going north. Nova said his phone had been turned off. His credit cards hadn't been used since yesterday morning. She asked again if Knox had any connection to Silas's plan. Any reason to help him. I told her I didn't know anymore. I thought I knew these people. Thought I understood them. But I'd been completely wrong about Silas. Maybe I was wrong about Knox too. Another knock on the door. A woman named Jade Horton came in. She was from Financial Crimes. She sat down with her laptop and asked to see my banking records. I pulled them up on my phone with shaking hands. Jade's face went dark when she saw the amounts. $53,000 transferred in less than 5 minutes. She asked how long I'd had to make the decision. I told her maybe 2 minutes, maybe less. Silas was holding Rowan over the edge and screaming at me to do it now. Jade explained that this was felony extortion combined with kidnapping. The money trail would help them locate Silas and Vivian. She started tracing where the transfers went. Her fingers moved fast across her keyboard. After about 20 minutes, she looked up. The money had gone to an account that was opened 3 weeks ago. It was under a fake business name. Completely fabricated. This meant Silas had been planning this for at least that long. Maybe longer. I felt sick. 3 weeks ago, we were still together. Still living like a normal family. He was kissing me goodnight, playing with Rowan, acting like everything was fine, and the whole time, He was planning to destroy my life, to steal my baby and take everything I had. I started remembering things, details I'd ignored at the time. Silas had been weird for about a month, asking strange questions about my savings, about my family's money, about whether I had life insurance. I'd thought he was being practical, maybe thinking about buying a house or planning for our future. Now I realized he was calculating, figuring out exactly how much he could steal from me, how much damage he could do before he disappeared with Rowan. Cade came back into the room. He'd been on the phone with one of his military contacts. They'd traced the van to a rental company about 40 miles away. Vivian had rented it 2 weeks ago using a fake ID. She'd paid in cash. The rental was reserved for a full month. A full month. They weren't planning to bring Rowan back in a few days. They weren't planning some short-term punishment. They were planning to hide him for weeks, maybe longer, to let me suffer while they kept him, while Vivian pretended to be his mother. Nova asked if she could talk to me privately. Marlo squeezed my hand and went into the kitchen with Cade and Jade. Nova sat closer and her voice got gentler. She explained that in most parental kidnapping cases, the child wasn't physically harmed. The parents still saw them as their child, still cared about their safety. But Vivian's involvement made things more complicated. Vivian's motivation wasn't just about hurting me. It was about taking Rowan permanently, about replacing me as his mother. Nova asked if I thought Rowan was okay right now, if I thought they would take care of him. I wanted to say yes, wanted to believe my baby was safe. But Nova paused before answering, just for a second. Then she said most likely he was fine. That careful pause told me everything. She was worried too. She wasn't sure. About an hour later, Nova got a call. She stepped outside to take it. When she came back, her face was grim. They'd found Knox's car. It was abandoned at a rest stop 40 miles north. The keys were still in the ignition. His wallet was gone. His phone was gone. There was no sign of a struggle. But there was also no sign of where he went from there. No surveillance footage of him leaving. No witnesses who saw him. He'd just vanished. Nova said there were two possibilities. Either Knox was running because he was guilty and involved in the plan, or someone had taken him to keep him quiet about what he knew. Either way, he was gone, and we had no way to find him. I sat at Marlo's kitchen table with a blank notebook in front of me. She handed me a pen and pulled a chair close to mine. We needed to write down everyone who might know where Vivian would take Rowan. Every friend, every relative, every place she'd ever mentioned. I started with Vivian's sister, but realized I didn't even know her name. Silas had always said his family was complicated. He kept me away from them. Never brought me to family gatherings. Never talked about his childhood much. Now I understood why. That separation wasn't accidental. He made sure I had no allies in his family. No one who might warn me what they were planning. Marlo asked about Vivian's friends, and I drew a blank. I'd met her maybe 10 times in the 2 years I was with Silas. She was always cold to me, always critical, but I never asked about her life because I was too busy trying to make her like me. The list stayed mostly empty. Just a few first names I remembered hearing. No addresses, no phone numbers, nothing useful. Nova's phone rang while we were working on the list. She stepped into the other room to take it. When she came back, her expression had changed. Someone had called the FBI tip line about Vivian. A woman named Grace, who used to be Vivian's neighbor. Grace had seen the Amber Alert and recognized Vivian's photo. She had information Nova needed me to hear. Nova put the call on speaker. Grace's voice was shaky but determined. She explained that she lived next door to Vivian about 15 years ago. Vivian had a daughter back then. The daughter was taken away by CPS when she was around 5 years old. Grace remembered social workers coming to the house multiple times. Remembered Vivian screaming at them from the front yard. The home was unsafe. Vivian was too controlling. Wouldn't let the child play with other kids. Kept her inside all the time. After they took the daughter away, Vivian became obsessed with getting another chance at motherhood. She talked about it constantly to anyone who would listen. How she would prove she could be a good mother. How the system was wrong about her. How she deserved to raise a child. The information hit me so hard I couldn't breathe for a second. Silas never mentioned his mother lost a child to the system. Never said he had a sister who was taken away. All those times Vivian said I was too young to be a good mother. All those comments about how she could raise Rowan better. It wasn't just about hurting me. Grace kept talking. She said Vivian never accepted responsibility for losing her daughter. Always blamed the social workers. Blamed the neighbors who called CPS. Blamed everyone except herself. She spent years planning how to prove she was a good mother. Buying parenting books, taking classes, building the perfect case for why she deserved another chance. Taking Rowan was about rewriting her past. About getting the child she lost back. About proving to herself and everyone else that she was right all along. Jade showed up an hour later with her laptop. She'd been tracing the money Silas stole from me and Knox. The $53,000 I transferred went into an account opened 3 weeks ago. The account was registered under a fake business name, complete with fake tax documents and a fake business address. She pulled up records showing 2 more accounts just like it, all opened within the past month, all using different fake business registrations. The money was withdrawn immediately after the transfers. Cash withdrawals from ATMs across 2 different states. Small amounts at different locations so it wouldn't trigger alerts. They'd planned this for at least 6 weeks, maybe longer. All that time I was living with Silas, trusting him, building a life with him. He was setting up the infrastructure to rob me and steal our baby. Jade showed me the withdrawal patterns on her screen, the careful spacing, the strategic locations. This wasn't something they threw together in a panic. This was calculated. Professional, almost. She said recovering the money was nearly impossible now. Once it's withdrawn as cash, there's no trail to follow. I hadn't slept in 2 days. My eyes burned. My hands shook constantly. I couldn't eat without feeling sick. Marlo kept trying to get me to rest, but I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rowan falling. Nova made a call, and 20 minutes later, a woman knocked on the door. Her name was Skylar, and she was a trauma therapist. Nova had asked her to come because she was worried I was going to collapse. Skylar sat down across from me at the kitchen table. She didn't try to make me feel better. Didn't say everything would be okay. She just started teaching me breathing techniques. Count to 4 breathing in. Hold for 4. Out for 4. Hold for 4. She made me do it with her until my hands stopped shaking quite so badly. She explained that my body was in survival mode right now. That was actually helping me, keeping me functional when I should be falling apart. The adrenaline and stress hormones were giving me the energy to keep going, to keep fighting for Rowan. She said the crash would come later, but right now, my body was doing exactly what it needed to do. Cade came in from the garage where he'd been making calls. His military contact had found something on Vivian's social media. He pulled up her account on his phone and showed me posts from 2 months ago. Cryptic stuff about second chances and fixing past mistakes. One post said something about how everyone deserves to prove they've changed. Another talked about preparing for a blessing. There were photos too. Baby clothes in Rowan's exact size. Nursery items, a crib, a changing table, bottles and formula. She'd been buying everything, building a complete setup for a baby. This wasn't just about taking him for a few days to punish me. She'd been preparing a space for him, getting everything she'd need to keep him long-term, to raise him as her own child. The posts were public. Anyone could have seen them. But I never looked at her social media, never thought to check what she was doing online. All the signs were there, and I missed every single one. Cade told us he'd hired a private investigator with his own money, a guy named Cooper who specialized in finding people who didn't want to be found. Cooper had been digging into Vivian's family connections. He found that Vivian's sister owned a rural property about 3 hours away. The property had been vacant for years. No mortgage because it was paid off decades ago. No utility bills because there was no active service. Nothing that would show up in normal database searches. But the property records showed Vivian's sister as the owner. Cooper was already driving out there. Nova immediately called the local police in that area. She coordinated with them to set up surveillance around the property without getting too close. They couldn't just rush in. If Silas saw police coming, he might hurt Rowan. They needed to watch first, confirm someone was actually there, then plan how to safely get Rowan out. 6 hours passed with no activity at the property. Cooper was parked down the road with binoculars. The local police had units positioned at different points around the area. I sat in Marlo's living room staring at my phone, waiting for any update. Marlo brought me water I didn't drink, food I couldn't eat. Then Cooper called Nova. He'd spotted movement in a back window. Someone walking past holding what looked like a baby carrier. Nova's whole team mobilized. The FBI tactical unit started heading toward the location. Nova warned Cooper not to approach the house, not to do anything that might alert them. I jumped up from the couch, grabbed my keys. Marlo blocked the door. She physically held me back when I tried to get past her. Reminded me that rushing there right now could put Rowan in more danger. If they saw me coming, they'd run again. Or worse. I had to let the FBI do their job. I sank back onto the couch. Marlo sat next to me and held my hand while we waited. The FBI surrounded the property at dawn. I listened to everything over Nova's phone on speaker. The tactical team announced themselves, ordered everyone inside to come out. They waited. No response. They breached the front door. I heard shouting. Commands to show hands, to get on the ground. Then silence. Nova's voice came through tense. The house was empty. They'd cleared out hours ago. The team found baby supplies scattered around. Recently used bottles in the sink. Food wrappers in the trash. Diapers in a bag by the door. Someone had been there with a baby, but they were gone now. Nova found a burner phone in the trash can. She checked the call history. One number had been called over and over. She ran the number. It was Knox's cell phone. He'd been in contact with them this whole time, feeding them information, warning them when we got close. The betrayal hit me all over again. Knox had seemed so scared, so innocent, but he was helping them the entire time. I felt like my brain was breaking. Every time we got close to finding Rowan, they disappeared. Like they knew exactly where we were and what we were doing. Nova sat down next to me. Her voice was calm but firm. She reminded me that each location they abandoned gave us more information. We were learning their patterns, their resources, how they moved, where they felt safe. Jade was already analyzing the supplies left behind. She'd gone through the trash, photographed everything. The diapers were a budget store brand. The formula was generic. The food wrappers were from cheap fast food places. They were spending carefully, watching their money. The $53,000 wouldn't last forever with 3 adults and a baby. Eventually they'd run out. They'd have to make mistakes. They'd have to take risks. And when they did, we'd be ready. The next morning, Nova called with news. She'd been trying to reach Gavin, Knox's roommate, for days. He finally picked up. Gavin told her Knox had come home 3 days ago, but only stayed for maybe 20 minutes. He grabbed clothes from his room, threw them in a bag, took his passport from the desk drawer. Gavin asked what was going on, and Knox just said he was fixing a family problem. Gavin thought that was weird because Knox looked scared, not like he was going to help someone. He kept looking over his shoulder at the door like someone might come in. Then he left, and Gavin hadn't heard from him since. Nova asked if Knox seemed like he wanted to be there, and Gavin said no. He seemed like he had to be there. Like someone was making him do something he didn't want to do. This changed everything because maybe Knox wasn't helping them by choice. Maybe they were forcing him somehow. Nova said she was getting a warrant for Knox's email to see if there was any proof of that. 2 days later, the warrant came through. Nova called me to Marlo's kitchen table where she had her laptop open. She'd found emails going back 2 months, all from Silas to Knox. The first one said they needed to talk about their sister. I stopped breathing. I didn't even know Silas had a sister. He never mentioned her once in the whole year we were together. Nova scrolled down and I read the emails. Silas was threatening Knox, saying he was going to tell their parents that Knox was responsible for their sister's death, that Knox caused the car accident that killed her, that their parents would never forgive him, that he'd lose his whole family. Knox's responses were desperate, begging Silas not to do that, saying it wasn't his fault, saying please, and Silas just kept pushing, kept saying Knox had to help him with something or he'd tell. The emails showed the whole plan forming. Silas needed Knox to play along with a fake affair story, to disappear after so it looked like we ran away together. Knox kept saying no at first, but Silas wore him down, threatened him over and over until Knox finally agreed. I felt sick reading it. Knox wasn't guilty. He was a victim just like me. Silas had been blackmailing his own brother for months, using their dead sister to force Knox to help kidnap Rowan. Nova closed the laptop and looked at me. She said this meant Knox might help us if we could reach him safely, if we could offer him protection from Silas. She started typing an email to Knox right there, offering him immunity from prosecution if he cooperated, promising FBI protection, begging him to respond if he saw it. She sent it and we waited. I couldn't stop thinking about Knox. How scared he must have been. How trapped. Silas had destroyed both of us in different ways. 3 days went by with no response. The failed raid felt like it happened weeks ago, even though it was less than a week. I was losing hope that we'd ever find Rowan. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer because I'd been getting random calls all week, but something made me pick up. Knox's voice came through, barely a whisper. He said he was at a motel with Silas and Vivian, but he could get away for about an hour. He was going to say he needed cigarettes. He gave me the address. Then he begged me not to bring police because Silas said if Knox betrayed them, he'd hurt Rowan. I told Knox to hang on, put the phone on speaker so Nova could hear. She was already typing on her laptop, pulling up maps, sending messages to her team. She mouthed at me to keep him talking. I asked Knox if Rowan was okay, and Knox said physically yes, but he cried a lot. Vivian kept saying he just needed time to forget his old life. Knox sounded like he was crying too. He said he had to go before Silas got suspicious. He'd be at the gas station 2 blocks from the motel in 15 minutes. Then he hung up. Nova was already on the phone with her team. She had people moving toward that location within minutes. She told me they'd pick up Knox and bring him somewhere safe where we could talk. I wanted to go, but Nova said absolutely not. If Silas was watching, he might recognize me. An hour later, Nova got the call that they had Knox. She drove me to a FBI office 20 minutes away. They brought Knox into a small room. He looked terrible. His eyes were red and his hands were shaking. He sat down across from me and started crying before anyone even asked a question. He kept saying he was sorry, over and over. I didn't know what to say to him. Nova started asking questions. Knox told us Silas had completely changed. He barely slept anymore. Just paced around checking the windows every few minutes, getting paranoid about every car that drove by. He'd started drinking heavily, like a bottle a day, fighting with Vivian about whether they should try to leave the country. Vivian was the opposite. She was obsessed with Rowan, treated him like he was her own baby, got angry whenever Knox suggested they needed an exit plan. She kept saying everything would work out, that this was her second chance to be a good mother. Knox said Rowan seemed okay physically, but he cried way more than before. He didn't smile much. Vivian would get frustrated when he cried and say he just needed to adjust. Nova asked Knox to explain the whole plan from the beginning. Knox took a shaky breath and started talking. He said Silas came to him 2 months ago, told him about this idea to get money from me. Said I had savings and Knox had money too, that we could make it look like an affair and use that to force us to pay. Knox said no at first, told Silas that was crazy. That's when Silas brought up their sister. Said he was going to tell their parents Knox caused the accident unless Knox helped. Knox broke down describing this part. He said their sister died in a car crash when Knox was driving 5 years ago. It wasn't his fault, but he'd always felt guilty. Their parents never blamed him, but Knox knew Silas could make them blame him if he wanted to. So Knox agreed to play along. He thought they were just going to threaten me and take money. He didn't know Silas was planning to actually take Rowan. When Silas dropped Rowan off that balcony, Knox thought he'd just watched his nephew die. He panicked and ran, but Silas found him the next day. Forced him to help hide Rowan or he'd tell the police Knox was part of the plan from the start. Knox had been trapped ever since. Nova asked about their movements. Knox said they'd been staying at cheap motels, never more than 2 nights in one place. Always paying cash. Moving around but staying within a few hours of the city. They had about $30,000 left from the money they stole. Vivian refused to talk about what happened when it ran out. Just kept saying it would work out. Silas was getting more unstable every day. Drinking more. Getting more paranoid. Knox was scared Silas would do something desperate when he realized they were trapped. Nova asked if Knox would wear a wire and go back. Knox's face went white. He said Silas would kill him if he found out. Nova promised they'd have a full team ready to move and the second things went wrong. They'd be watching the whole time. Knox would be safe. Knox looked at me. Asked if I thought he should do it. I wanted to say no. I didn't want to put him in danger. But I also needed my baby back. I told him I couldn't ask him to do that. But if he was willing, we might finally get Rowan. Knox nodded. Said he'd do it. Nova's team spent an hour getting him ready. They put a tiny microphone under his shirt. Gave him a story about his phone dying and having to walk to a store for a charger. Went over what to say if Silas got suspicious. Then they drove him back to the gas station. Nova took me back to Marlo's house. Set up the audio feed in the living room so I could listen. I sat on the couch with Marlo next to me. Heard Knox's footsteps. His breathing. The sound of him opening the motel room door. Then Silas's voice, sharp and angry, asking where he'd been. Knox stuck to the story. Said his phone died. He went to buy a charger. Silas didn't believe him. Started yelling about how Knox took too long. About how he couldn't trust anyone. Knox kept saying he just went to the store. In the background, I heard Rowan crying. That sound went through me like a knife. My baby was crying and I couldn't get to him. Then I heard Vivian singing. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments. Some lullaby. Her voice sounded sweet and gentle, but it was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. She was singing to my baby like he was hers. Like she had any right to comfort him. Silas kept interrogating Knox. Asking who he talked to. If he called anyone. Knox kept denying it, but his voice was shaking. I could hear the fear. Silas said he didn't trust this place anymore. Said they were leaving right now. Knox tried to argue. Said they should wait until morning. It was late and Rowan needed to sleep. But Silas wasn't listening. I heard things being thrown into bags. Vivian protesting. Rowan crying harder. Nova grabbed her phone. Called her team. Told them to move in now. Through the audio feed I heard pounding on the door. Someone yelling that it was the FBI. Then chaos. Silas screaming. Rowan screaming louder. Vivian shrieking about them taking her baby. The audio feed went crazy with sounds of doors breaking and people yelling. I heard boots on floors. Heavy footsteps running. Someone yelling FBI commands. Then more chaos. Silas screaming something I couldn't understand. Furniture crashing. Knox yelling for everyone to stop. Through it all, Rowan kept crying that awful scared cry that made my chest hurt. Nova grabbed her phone and started talking to her team. Marlo held my hand so tight it hurt, but I didn't care. I just sat there shaking and listening. An agent's voice came through saying they had Silas in custody. He tried to run out the back door, but they tackled him in the parking lot. He was on the ground with his face in the dirt and his hands being cuffed behind his back. But Vivian had locked herself in the bathroom with Rowan. The negotiator's voice came through the wire. Calm and steady. Talking to Vivian through the bathroom door. Asking her to open up. Telling her nobody wanted to hurt her or the baby. Vivian was crying and saying no over and over. Saying they couldn't take her baby away again. That she deserved another chance. That she would be a good mother this time. The negotiator kept talking. Kept saying the same things in different ways. Minutes passed. 5 minutes. 10. 15. Rowan's crying got weaker. Like he was getting tired. That scared me even more. What if something was wrong with him? What if he was sick or hurt? 20 minutes in and I couldn't take it anymore. I started crying, and Marlo pulled me against her shoulder. Then finally Vivian's voice came through. Quieter now. Saying okay. Saying she would open the door. The sound of a lock clicking. The door opening. An agent saying he had the baby. Vivian sobbing about just wanting to be a good mother this time. About how she never got to raise her daughter, and this was supposed to fix everything. Nova told me they were bringing Rowan to the FBI office downtown. That I should meet them there. Cade drove because my hands were shaking too bad. The whole drive I kept seeing Silas dropping Rowan off that balcony. Kept hearing that scream. Kept thinking about my baby being gone for 8 days. What he went through. If he would even remember me. We got to the FBI office and they took me to a small room with chairs and a table. Nova came in carrying Rowan. The second I saw him, I started crying. She put him in my arms and my legs just gave out. I went down to the floor holding him. He was lighter than before. Thinner. His face looked different. Scared. He cried when I held him, but it wasn't his normal cry. It was this frightened sound like he didn't trust anything anymore. His diaper was dirty and he had a rash. His clothes were too big, like he'd lost weight. But he was alive. He was back. I sat on that floor for 30 minutes just holding him and crying. Marlo sat next to me crying too. Rowan kept looking around like he expected someone to take him away again. His little hands grabbed at my shirt. I talked to him. Told him he was safe now. That mommy had him. That nobody was going to hurt him. Nova brought a bottle and I fed him. He drank it so fast like he was starving. That made me cry harder thinking about them not feeding him enough. After a while, the paramedics came in. They wanted to check Rowan over. Make sure he was okay. I didn't want to let him go, but Nova said they needed to examine him. The paramedics were gentle. They checked his temperature and heart rate and breathing. They said he was dehydrated, underweight, but not seriously injured. They wanted to take him to the hospital for a full examination. I told them I was coming too, that I wasn't letting him out of my sight ever again. We rode in the ambulance. I held Rowan the whole time. The hospital did more tests, checked everything. The doctor came back and said Rowan had an ear infection that wasn't being treated. Some bruising on his arms and legs from being held too rough. But overall, he was okay. The doctor told me babies are tough, that they bounce back. But I should watch for signs of trauma as he grows. Things like being scared of strangers or having trouble sleeping. They gave me medicine for the ear infection and cream for the diaper rash. Nova met us at the hospital and told me Silas and Vivian were officially arrested. They were being charged with kidnapping, extortion, child endangerment, conspiracy. She said the charges were solid, that they were looking at decades in prison. Knox was offered immunity in exchange for his testimony. He took it right away. Started telling them everything. Nova said Knox wanted to apologize to me, that he felt terrible about what happened. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me understood he was threatened, that Silas had been blackmailing him, but he still helped take my baby. He still participated. I told Nova I wasn't ready to talk to Knox yet, maybe not ever. She said that was okay, that I didn't owe him anything. The prosecutor was building the case now, getting all the evidence together. The security footage, the wire recordings, Knox's testimony, financial records, everything. Nova said it was one of the strongest cases she'd ever seen, that there was no way Silas and Vivian were getting out of this. Jade came to see me the next day at Marlo's house. She sat down with papers and a tablet and went through everything about the money. She said recovering it would be almost impossible. It was withdrawn as cash from different ATMs across 2 states, spent on motels and food and gas. There was nothing left to seize. I could sue Silas and Vivian in civil court, but they had no assets. No house, no savings, nothing. The $53,000 I'd saved for years was just gone. I'd have to start over from nothing. Jade looked sad when she told me this, said she was sorry, that she wished there was more she could do. I just nodded. The money didn't matter as much as getting Rowan back, but it still hurt. That was years of saving, working extra shifts, skipping things I wanted, all gone because Silas planned this whole thing to rob me and take my baby. Marlo and Cade told me I was staying with them, that I wasn't going back to that apartment. I couldn't anyway. Every time I thought about that place, I saw Silas holding Rowan over the balcony. Heard him screaming. I couldn't afford a new place on my own now that my savings were gone. Cade pulled me aside and told me not to worry about money right now, that they would help, that I could stay as long as I needed. I started crying again. Told him I couldn't just take their charity forever, that I needed to find work, rebuild my savings, create a stable home for Rowan. Cade said we'd figure it out, that right now I just needed to focus on Rowan and healing. The practical stuff could wait. Skylar started coming to see me twice a week. She said I was showing signs of trauma, having nightmares, panic attacks. Every time Rowan cried, I was back on that balcony, seeing Silas hold him over the edge, hearing him threaten to drop him. Every time someone knocked on the door, I thought it was Vivian coming back. My heart would start racing. My hands would shake. Skylar taught me breathing exercises, ways to ground myself when the panic started. She said this was normal trauma response, that it would get better with time. But right now, I felt like I was barely holding myself together. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and have to check on Rowan, make sure he was still there, still breathing, still safe. Marlo would find me sitting next to his crib at 3 a.m. just watching him sleep. The prosecutor called a few weeks later, said they were offering Silas a plea deal, 20 years instead of life if he pleaded guilty, and told them where the money went. I asked what Silas said. The prosecutor told me he refused, that Silas insisted he did nothing wrong, that I deserved what happened for disrespecting his family, that I was a terrible mother and he was protecting Rowan. The prosecutor said Silas showed no remorse at all, just kept blaming me, saying I forced him to do this. I hung up and sat there feeling sick. The man I loved never existed. It was all a mask. All fake. The real Silas was someone who could drop his own child off a balcony, who could plan for weeks to rob me and steal my baby, who could look at me with those empty eyes and feel nothing. Vivian's lawyer tried a different approach, argued she was mentally ill, that she wasn't responsible for her actions. The prosecutor brought in Grace and other people who knew Vivian. They testified about her years of planning, her obsession with getting another child after losing custody of her daughter, the social media posts about second chances, the baby supplies she'd been buying for months. The judge listened to all of it, then denied the mental illness defense, said Vivian knew exactly what she was doing, that she made calculated choices, planned everything out. That mental illness doesn't excuse kidnapping a baby. The preliminary hearing happened 6 weeks after Rowan came home. Knox had to testify, describe everything Silas did, how he planned it all, the threats, the blackmail. I sat in the courtroom holding Rowan and watched Knox on the stand. He was shaking, crying, talking about how Silas approached him 2 months before, showed him the fake affair evidence, threatened to tell their parents Knox caused their sister's death. Knox broke down when he described hearing Rowan scream when Silas dropped him, said he thought the baby would die, that he'd have that on his conscience forever. The judge looked angry, really angry. Silas's lawyer looked like he knew the case was over, that there was no way to defend this. The judge set the trial date for 4 months from now, said the charges would stand, that Silas and Vivian would remain in custody until trial. I needed to start working again. Marlo set me up with a remote data entry job through a contact of hers. The pay was bad, really bad. I used to make decent money before all this. Now I was entering numbers into spreadsheets for $9 an hour, but it was something I could do from Marlo's guest room while Rowan napped. I worked 4 hours a day. Marlo watched Rowan during those hours and refused to let me pay her. She said that's what family does. I appreciated it, but I also felt terrible. I couldn't even afford childcare for my own kid. I couldn't provide for him. Everything I'd saved was gone, and I was starting over from zero. Rowan started acting different about 2 weeks after we got him back. He'd scream whenever a man came near him. The mail carrier, Cade, even the pediatrician at his checkup. He'd cling to me so hard his little fingers left marks on my arms. He wouldn't let me put him down. At night, he'd wake up crying every few hours. Sometimes he'd just lie there staring at nothing with this blank look on his face. The pediatrician said we needed to see a child trauma specialist right away. She said the earlier we started treatment, the better chance Rowan had of recovering without lasting damage. The specialist charged $200 per session. We needed to go twice a week. I didn't have $400 a week. I didn't have $400 total. Cade found out about the cost somehow. He told me he was paying for it and I could pay him back someday when I got back on my feet. He said it like it was no big deal, like it wasn't $800 a month. I cried in Marlo's kitchen after he left for work. 2 months went by. Rowan's therapy was helping. He was still clingy, but the screaming had stopped. Then the prosecutor called. She said Silas wanted to make a statement to me through his lawyer. Nova told me not to read it. She said it would just upset me and wouldn't help anything. But I wanted to know what he had to say. I thought maybe there'd be an apology. Maybe some explanation that made sense. The prosecutor emailed me the letter. I read it sitting on Marlo's couch while Rowan played with blocks on the floor. The letter was 3 pages long. Silas wrote that I was too young to be a good mother, that I didn't respect his family, that I would have ruined Rowan's life if he hadn't intervened. He said I forced him to do what he did, that it was my fault for not listening to Vivian's advice about parenting. There was no apology anywhere in those 3 pages. No acknowledgement that he'd held our baby over a balcony, that he'd robbed me, that he'd planned the whole thing for weeks. I walked to the kitchen trash can and threw my phone in it. Marlo fished it out later. I called the prosecutor back and told her I had nothing to say to Silas. A week after that, a lawyer contacted me. He said he represented Vivian's family. They wanted to meet with me. They wanted to apologize and offer to help with expenses. I was suspicious. Nova said it might be legitimate, that sometimes families of criminals try to make amends. I agreed to meet them at a coffee shop with Nova present. 3 people showed up. Vivian's brother, his wife, and their adult daughter. The brother started crying the second he sat down. He said he was so sorry, that he should have seen the warning signs. He told me Vivian lost custody of her daughter 15 years ago. That CPS took the girl because Vivian was too controlling and the home was unsafe. He said Vivian had been obsessed with getting another chance at motherhood ever since, that she talked about it constantly, that he should have known she'd do something like this. His wife said they had no idea Vivian was planning to take Rowan, that they would have stopped her if they'd known. They offered to pay for Rowan's therapy and my legal fees. All of it. However much it cost. Part of me wanted to refuse. I didn't want anything connected to Vivian, but I needed the help. I needed it badly. So I said yes. The brother set up a bank transfer that day. Knox called me 3 weeks later. He said he was moving across the country, starting over somewhere new. He wanted to meet with me one last time before he left. We met at a park. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in weeks. He apologized again for everything, for helping Silas, for not warning me, for running away. Then he tried to hand me an envelope. He said there was $10,000 inside. Everything he had saved. I told him no. I couldn't take his money. He insisted. He said he needed to do something to make this right, that he'd never forgive himself if he didn't try to help. We both started crying standing there in the park. I took the envelope. We talked for a few more minutes. About how Silas had destroyed any chance of us being friends. About how we were both his victims in different ways. Then Knox got in his car and drove away. I never saw him again. The trial date arrived 4 months after the kidnapping. I had to testify on the first day. The prosecutor prepared me for what to expect. Told me to just tell the truth about what happened. I sat in the witness box and described everything. Watching Silas hold Rowan over the balcony, the fake affair accusation, being forced to transfer all my money, seeing him drop Rowan, running down the stairs expecting to find my baby dead. The jury sat there staring at me. Some of them were crying by the time I finished. Silas stared at me the whole time with those cold, empty eyes. I stared right back. I didn't look away once. I wanted him to see that he hadn't broken me, that I was still here fighting. Vivian testified the next day. She actually said she was rescuing Rowan from me, that I was a bad mother and she was giving him a better life, that she did the right thing. The jury looked horrified. Even her own lawyer looked uncomfortable. The jury went to deliberate. 3 hours later, they came back. The judge read the verdict. Guilty on all counts for both Silas and Vivian. Kidnapping, extortion, child endangerment, conspiracy, everything. The sentencing happened a week later. Silas got 35 years in prison. Vivian got 25 years. The judge said their actions were depraved and calculated. That the only reason they weren't getting life sentences was because Rowan survived without serious physical injuries. I sat in the courtroom listening to the sentences. I felt relief but not satisfaction. No amount of prison time could undo what they did. No sentence could give me back the person I was before this happened. But at least they'd be locked up. At least they couldn't hurt anyone else. After the trial ended, I started meeting with Skylar twice a week instead of once. We worked through everything that happened. The betrayal, the trauma, the grief for the life I thought I had with Silas. I was angry at myself, for not seeing warning signs, for trusting him completely, for being so naive. Skylar kept telling me I was a victim of a sophisticated manipulator, that nothing about this was my fault, that Silas had fooled everyone, not just me. She said it over and over, week after week. Slowly, I started believing her, started understanding that I couldn't have known, that there was no way to predict someone would do something this evil. 6 months after the kidnapping, I moved into my own apartment with Rowan. It was tiny, just 1 bedroom. The neighborhood wasn't great, but the rent was something I could afford with my data entry job and the money Knox gave me. I bought furniture from thrift stores, set up Rowan's crib in the bedroom corner, installed 3 different locks on the front door, put in a security system that probably cost too much, but I needed to feel safe. I needed to feel in control of my space. Rowan was doing better by then. He still had hard days, still got anxious sometimes, but he was laughing again, playing with toys, starting to trust people besides me. The trauma specialist said he was making good progress. Marlo came over one day with a stack of papers, applications for victim compensation funds, assistance programs, things I didn't even know existed. She helped me fill everything out, explained what each program covered. Within a month, I was approved for several of them. The money wasn't much, but it helped. Combined with working full-time now and the assistance programs, I was slowly rebuilding my savings. It would take years to get back to where I was, but at least I was moving forward instead of just surviving. Jade called around the same time. She said the financial investigation was officially closed. The money was unrecoverable. Silas and Vivian had spent it all. There was nothing left to seize. But she said my cooperation helped them identify patterns, that they'd used what they learned to prevent other similar scams. At least something good came from it. 2 months after the trial, I sat in Skylar's office for Rowan's therapy update. His trauma therapist came out and sat down across from me. She pulled out her notes and started going through his progress. The nightmares were happening less often now. Maybe once every 2 weeks instead of every night. He was hitting all his developmental milestones despite everything that happened. His attachment to me was strong and healthy. She said he was doing really well considering what he went through. Then she said something that made me start crying right there in her office. She told me that children are incredibly tough when they have a stable, loving caregiver, that I was providing exactly what Rowan needed to heal. I'd been so scared I'd failed him by not protecting him in the first place, by not seeing what Silas was planning, by letting him get taken at all. But hearing that I was doing okay as his mom made something loosen in my chest. I walked out of that appointment feeling lighter than I had in months. A week later, Marlo told me about a support group for parents whose kids were kidnapped by family members. I didn't want to go at first. I didn't want to sit in a room and talk about what happened. But she convinced me to try it once. The group met in a community center basement every Tuesday night. There were 8 other parents there when I walked in. Everyone looked tired. Everyone looked like they understood. We went around the circle sharing our stories. A woman named Sarah talked about her daughter being taken by her ex-husband for 3 months. She said it took her 2 years to stop having panic attacks every single day. But now she was genuinely okay. She had good days and bad days, but mostly good ones. Her daughter was doing well in the school. They were building a normal life. Hearing her say that gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that someday this wouldn't be the first thing I thought about when I woke up. That it wouldn't define every moment of my life. I started going to that group every week. On Rowan's second birthday, I threw him a party at Marlo's house. Just a few close friends. Nothing big. I bought a small cake from the grocery store and some balloons. Rowan sat in his high chair and Marlo put the cake in front of him. He stared at it for a second. Then he grabbed a handful and shoved it in his mouth. Chocolate everywhere. All over his face and hands and the high chair. He was laughing so hard. Everyone was taking pictures and smiling. I watched him and realized how far we'd both come. He didn't remember what happened. To him, it was just a gap in his early life that wouldn't leave conscious scars in his memory. I would carry the memories for both of us. But I was determined they wouldn't poison his childhood. He deserved to be happy and carefree. He deserved to just be a kid. 3 months later, my manager called me into her office at work. I thought I was in trouble for something. Instead, she told me they were promoting me. Better position with actual benefits and decent pay. It wasn't anything glamorous. Still data entry, but with more responsibility and better hours. But it was stable. It meant I could provide for Rowan without depending on Marlo and Cade forever. I opened a new savings account that same day. Started putting money away again, even though it was hard to trust that it wouldn't just disappear. Jade had given me advice about financial safety after everything happened. Setting up protections and alerts I never knew existed. 2-factor authentication on everything. Alerts for any transaction over $50. A separate account that required in-person verification to access. It felt paranoid, but it also felt necessary. 2 years after the kidnapping, I went on my first date. Skylar had been working with me on trust issues for months, helping me recognize that not everyone was a manipulator like Silas, that there were good people out there. The man I was seeing worked in accounting. He had a boring job and a boring car and a boring apartment. It was perfect. He was patient when I had panic attacks. He didn't push when I needed space. He was good with Rowan, playing trucks on the floor and reading books at bedtime. I wasn't ready for anything serious, but it felt good to remember I could have a life beyond being a victim. That I could be a person who went on dates and laughed at jokes and thought about a future. Nova called me one afternoon out of nowhere. She said she was using my case in training sessions for new FBI agents, teaching them about parental kidnapping investigations. She asked if I would be willing to come speak to her team about the victim's perspective. I said yes without really thinking about it. The training facility was in a building downtown. 20 agents sitting in rows looking at me. I told them everything. What it felt like to watch Silas hold Rowan over that balcony. The terror of finding him gone. The days of not knowing if he was alive. Working with law enforcement and feeling helpless. Getting him back and dealing with the aftermath. They listened without interrupting. Asked thoughtful questions afterward about what helped and what didn't. Several of them came up after and thanked me for my courage. It felt like taking something terrible and creating something meaningful from it. Like maybe other families wouldn't have to go through what I did, because these agents would know better how to help. When Rowan turned 3, I enrolled him in preschool. The first day I had a full panic attack in the parking lot. My hands were shaking. So bad I could barely unbuckle his car seat. I kept thinking someone would take him, that I'd come back and he'd be gone again. The teacher came out when she saw me struggling. I explained our history. She didn't judge or look at me like I was crazy. She just said they would work with me on a safety plan. Extra check-in procedures. A code word only I knew. Permission required for anyone else to pick him up, even with written authorization. After a week, I was able to drop him off without crying. He loved school, he made friends, he learned songs and came home covered in paint and glue. Watching him thrive felt like proof that we were both healing, that normal life was possible. 3 years after the trial, I got a letter about Silas's first parole hearing. My stomach dropped when I saw the envelope. I had to write a victim impact statement. Explain to the parole board why he shouldn't be released. I sat at my kitchen table for hours trying to find the words. Finally, I just wrote the truth. How his actions destroyed my sense of safety and trust. How I still had nightmares about that day. How Rowan still showed signs of early trauma even though he didn't consciously remember. How I was terrified of what Silas would do if he got out. The parole board denied his request. He wouldn't be eligible again for 5 years. I felt relieved, but also tired. Tired of having him take up space in my thoughts. Tired of letting him have power over my emotions. Skylar and I started working on strategies for letting go of the anger that was keeping me stuck. It was hard. Some days I wanted to stay angry. Anger felt safer than vulnerability. But slowly I started choosing to move forward instead of staying trapped in the past. I reached a point where I could go entire days without thinking about the kidnapping. Rowan was thriving in preschool. I was stable financially. I was building a life that felt genuinely mine, rather than defined by what happened. Marlo commented one day that I seemed lighter, more like myself. I realized she was right. The trauma would always be part of my history, but it wasn't the center of my identity anymore. I was a mom, a friend, a person with a job and hobbies and plans for the future. On the 4th anniversary of getting Rowan back, I took him to the park. He ran straight for the playground equipment, climbed up the ladder, and went down the slide over and over. No fear, no hesitation. Just a normal 4-year-old having fun. He had no memory of Silas or Vivian. No conscious knowledge of what they did. To him, it had just always been the two of us. Our little family was complete. I sat on a bench watching him play and thought about the person I was 4 years ago. Naive and trusting and completely unprepared for what was coming. And the person I was now. Stronger and wiser and more careful but not broken. I'd survived something that should have destroyed me. And I'd made sure Rowan could still have a good childhood despite it all. 6 months after that day at the park, I saved enough to pay Cade back for the therapy costs. I showed up at their house with a check and told him I needed to do this. He tried to refuse, but I insisted. This was about me taking control of my life again. He looked at the check for a long time, then nodded and took it. The next week, Marlo told me he put every dollar in a college fund for Rowan. She said that's what family does. They invest in each other's futures. I cried when she told me. Cade and Marlo had become Rowan's aunt and uncle in every way that mattered. Their support made survival possible. Around the same time, Vivian's brother James sent another check for Rowan's therapy and education. He'd been doing this for over a year now. At first, I felt guilty taking money from her family. But James explained on the phone that his family lost someone to her delusions too. Helping us was part of how they processed their own grief and guilt. We started exchanging updates a few times a year. He sent birthday cards to Rowan signed Uncle James. It was a connection to family that wasn't poisoned by what happened. Rowan would never know Vivian, but he could know James. That felt right. Then Knox reached out through email after 3 years of no contact. He asked if he could send birthday presents to Rowan. I stared at that email for 2 days before responding. Skylar and I talked through it in therapy. I decided to allow it with clear terms. He could send gifts, but would never have direct contact with Rowan until Rowan was old enough to understand the full story and decide for himself. Knox wrote back within an hour accepting the terms. He seemed grateful I was even willing to consider it. His first gift arrived 2 weeks later. A wooden train set with Rowan's name carved into one of the cars. The gifts were always thoughtful and right for Rowan's age. Knox had built a new life in another state and seemed to be genuinely doing better. I started volunteering with an organization that helps parents navigate the legal system after parental kidnapping. Using my experience to guide others through the process felt redemptive. Like I was taking the worst thing that ever happened to me and using it to help people. The parents I worked with were so grateful for advice from someone who understood. They asked questions the lawyers couldn't answer because the lawyers hadn't lived it. I showed them how to prepare victim impact statements, how to work with FBI agents, how to stay functional when you feel like you're falling apart. Their progress gave me continued hope. When one of them got their kid back, I felt almost as happy as when I got Rowan back. Rowan started kindergarten that fall. I was a mess dropping him off the first day, even though his preschool transition had gone well. But he ran right into the classroom and started playing with blocks. His teacher called me that afternoon. She said he was confident and well-adjusted. She commented on how easily he made friends and followed directions. She had no idea what he survived as a baby. I didn't tell her unless it became relevant to his education. He was just a normal kid who loved dinosaurs and building blocks. That normalcy was the greatest victory. Every milestone he hit felt like proof that we made it through to the other side. His first day riding the school bus. His first friend coming over to play. His first time reading a full book by himself. These normal moments meant everything. 5 years after the kidnapping, I met someone at a coffee shop. We started talking while waiting for our orders. He asked me out and I said yes after running a background check. Skylar had been encouraging me to try dating again. This guy was patient with my trauma responses. When I flinched at loud noises, he didn't ask why. When I needed to check on Rowan 3 times during our second date, he understood. He was good with Rowan too. They played dinosaurs together and he never acted annoyed when Rowan interrupted us. He had no connection to my past. No ties to Silas or Vivian or any of it. After 6 months, we started talking about moving in together. I was nervous about combining households, about letting someone that close again. But I was also excited about building a future that was about more than just survival. Skylar said this is what healthy recovery looks like. Being able to trust again without being reckless. Learning to open your heart while still protecting yourself. I'd rebuilt my savings to nearly what they were before. The number in my bank account wasn't quite $53,000, but it was close. I was working in a job I actually enjoyed with room for advancement. My boss had hinted at a promotion coming next quarter. Rowan was thriving in the school and showed no lasting effects from his early trauma beyond some minor attachment sensitivity. His therapist said it was manageable and might fade completely as he got older. We had a community of friends and chosen family who supported us. Marlo and Cade, obviously. James, who sent cards and checks. The families I volunteered with who became friends. My coworkers who invited us to barbecues and birthday parties. The life I had now was different from what I imagined before everything happened. But it was genuinely good. On a regular Tuesday evening, I was making dinner while Rowan did homework at the kitchen table. He was working on writing his numbers. His tongue stuck out when he concentrated. I was chopping vegetables for stir-fry. The radio played quiet music in the background. My boyfriend was coming over later. We were going to watch a movie after Rowan went to bed. It was so normal, so peaceful, and I realized I was happy. Not just surviving or coping, but actually happy with the life we built. The kidnapping would always be part of our story. I still had nightmares sometimes. I still checked the locks 3 times before bed, but it wasn't the whole story anymore. We were safe, we were loved, we were moving forward. Silas and Vivian took so much from us. They took my savings and my trust and my sense of security. They took those 8 days when I didn't know if my baby was alive. But they didn't take everything. They didn't take our ability to heal, to trust again, to build something beautiful from the wreckage. Rowan looked up from his homework and asked what was for dinner. I told him stir-fry with chicken. He made a face because he didn't like vegetables, but I knew he'd eat them anyway. He went back to his numbers. I went back to chopping. The evening stretched ahead of us full of ordinary moments, and that felt like the truest victory possible. Well, that's the big ending. If you're still watching, you've got impressive patience. Might as well subscribe, we're both in too deep now.